Welcome back to Frontend Hire. Today we're going to practice one of the questions based on CSS. I will be adding more CSS based questions, but for now we're going to work on this classic question. It's called, can you center a div? This is technically a joke in the CSS community that how difficult it is to center a div, but it can actually be a very good question, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask to a intern or maybe a fresh graduate, because it tells quite a bit about the CSS fundamental. Coming to the question, all we have to do is center a div horizontally and vertically using CSS. And our instructions are to write the CSS in the style.css file, or we could also use Tailwind CSS if you want to. I would suggest you use classic CSS because in an interview setting, bringing in Tailwind takes time, right? So if you want to enable Tailwind, we can just use it. And I will be going through both the solutions using Tailwind and using regular CSS. All right, let's get to the solution. Now, depending on how confident you are, you might have already done this a couple of times. One of the ways to do this is using absolute positioning. So I'm going to use another div, and this is going to take a class of relative box. I could name it something like this. Don't worry if the formatting, Prettier will take care of it. And I'm going to just add a class called center for this particular div. Now coming to the styles. We don't need this body styles. Okay. I have my relative box. So this is going to be a position of relative. Relative. Good. And now my center class will take in a position of absolute. And here's the trick. This is pretty much a trick, and you just have to do this many times to know that. So it's basically do a 50% to left, do a 50% to the top, do a 50% to the left. And then we also use transform to translate it minus 50% vertically and minus 50% horizontally. Right. But you could still see that it's not centered vertically. It is centered horizontally, but it isn't centered vertically. And this is where most interns kind of struggle because of the CSS fundamentals. And if you kind of inspect it, right? If you just inspect, you'll immediately see that the HTML, in fact, doesn't take full height, right? So that's the problem here. The body doesn't take full height, even the HTML doesn't take full height. So that is why your code works, but it's just not the complete code. So in order to center this vertically, all we have to do is give a height of 100 VH. And now it is centered vertically and horizontally, but there's another issue over here. Why is there a scroll bar? And you can pretty much understand the proper issue if you add some colors, background. And if you inspect this, you could see that the body, right? The body tag has a default margin of 8 pixels, which is causing the issue over here. So all we have to do is open a body tag and set the margin to 0. And the scroll bar is gone. So this particular code which we just wrote, body margin equal to 0, is kind of called a CSS reset. A very basic CSS reset would look something like this. We use a asterisk, which indicates all the HTML tags, right? And we do something like this. This is a very bare bones CSS reset. There are more complex CSS resets, and there's also something called normalize. So yeah, this was the solution with absolute positioning. But what if you wanted to use a flex box? We could still do that. And this time we're not going to use absolute positioning, right? So we're going to just still retain the height because we still need that. Otherwise it won't work. Coming to our center class, this time the display is going to be flex. We set the display to be flex. Justify content to be center, horizontally center. And now we again do align items, center. But this time again, it's not being centered vertically, and this has to do with something with how Flexbox works. And if you inspect again, you see that this div center, the class center, doesn't take full height yet. So here we gotta have to do something like this. So we got to give the height 100 VH and 100%. So this center will take the entire height of the relative box. So now this is also center. We don't have the scroll bar because as usual, we are using the CSS reset, right? So this was the solution using Flexbox. Coming to the solution where we use Tailwind, I'm going to just reset my workspace. And I'm going to just put my Tailwind CDN class. Did you observe something? The moment you import the Tailwind CDN, there are certain default styles being applied. And if you notice, even the margin is gone. And this has to do with Tailwind, because Tailwind imports something called a CSS normalize. Not a CSS reset, it uses a CSS normalize. Normalize tries to bring consistent styles across all the browsers, whereas CSS reset basically removes all the styling, right? It's basically up to you and what you want to use. But yeah, if you use Tailwind, it's going to use CSS normalize. Again, we can use another div to, since we're doing absolute positioning, we still have to have a parent div. And this time to get 100 VH, I'm going to use head screen. And I'm going to give a relative positioning again. And again, absolute. In Tailwind, it's just absolute. Top 1 by 2 to get the top 50% and the left 1 by 2 to get left 50%. And to get translate, transform is basically translate. You don't have transform. You got to call those individual classes. And it's going to be x 1 by 2 and minus translate. Maybe I can zoom out a bit. And minus translate y 1 by 2. So this again centers it. We did not have to do anything related to CSS reset because Tailwind imports normalized styles. Now let's do this in Flexbox. Again, we don't need this relative since we're now going to use Flexbox and all these styles can be removed. I'm going to use the Flexbox, flex, h full to get the height full. Item center, and then we also have justify center. I think we got both the solutions done, and you can also read the solution. It's pretty much what I did over here. And I think I also attached a couple of resources which talk more into what CSS reset, what a Tailwind CSS normalizes, whether normalize versus reset, which is better. And there's also another way to center this, and it's using grid. So I think Josh does talk about that. So you could go and read his article. And yeah, I think that was it for this video. I'll see you in another video soon. Thank you.